Welcome back to the Mackem in the Middle podcast. First one in about 2 months for numerous reasons, mainly because we've been shit this season. And this podcast is going to be talking all about that, kind of as a season review, looking at some of the good parts, some of the bad parts, some of the news that comes from it, and of course, a little bit of a look ahead into not just next season, but the summer as well, which is rapidly approaching, albeit after the Euros. So joined with Michael, joined by John as well, to talk about everything that's happened in the past kind of 9 months. Most of it is negative. And the first thing I will say, John, is what a shit season.
Yeah, it has been. We were riding on the high of last season. You think you're going to build. And then this one, you sort of almost fallen out of love with it, a little bit. And just ended, with nothingness. Just, we lost to Sheffield Wednesday and I wasn't even bothered. And that's weird for me because, I'm proper into it. But yeah, just when they scored, I just genuinely wasn't bothered. And I couldn't wait to get the season finished. And now I'm slowly on the wind of, right, it's starting to get intriguing now, what we're going to do, what decisions we're going to make. And I know it's only just finished, but I am starting to get that tiny bit of excitement back. But yeah, season on the whole, just ugh.
You say excitement, but I think part of it's boredom as well. Even though it has been a shit season, there's still something to occupy a weekend, wasn't it? And now it's just waiting for that something to reoccupy your weekend, which is about 4 months away, I think it is now, isn't it? I think it's the second week in August. I think the new season starts, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong on that, but I think it's around then. But it's a weird season to talk about, Michael, because of how good last season was in comparison to this season. I think we lost, was it 22 games I think we lost this season?
Yes, you're right. 22
which is only one defeat less than the season in which we finished bottom of the league about 7 years ago, which is quite miraculous. And I think there was only 3 teams, maybe even only 2 teams actually lost more games than us this season. But had you reversed this season and last season was the season that we finished, where we have now, ended on quite just kind of fizzled out. We end up in playoffs this season. You'd look at that as, it's not been a bad couple of seasons. But because this season's followed what was a very good season, it has very much has been, I'd say, a backwards step, but it's more of a backwards leap.
Couldn't put that phrase better myself when you're describing the season, could you? But you're right. I've said this point a few times that if you swap the seasons around, then I think then you would see it as a good sign for the phrase obsession with progression, funnily enough, which is something I've grown tired of hearing people take the mick out of, to be honest. But it is applicable in this case because you're progressing from 5th in League One, 16th Championship, 6th in the Championship. So it does look really, really good. But as we know, football isn't always linear, is it? But I mean, you're right. I just don't. The season's just been shit. There's just no way to describe it, really. And it's funny because for me, it's like the game when you look at a game with contrasting halves. It's a tale of two halves. For me, it's a tale of two halves of the season where I felt up until Michael Beale's appointment, the season was actually pretty good, I think. But I can't stress enough. I think obviously a lot of people, we'll touch on it later, but a lot of people talk about the sacking of Mowbray, the appointment of Beale, the reappointment of Dodds, basically. What the turning point was. For me, it was the appointment of Beale, but that's obviously subject to opinion interpretation. But yeah, I think I got to the same point where John did. I think even when we went 1-0 down or 2-0 down, whichever goal it was against the Sheffield Wednesday game, I just couldn't wait for full time to come along. And it's sad that it's got to that point, but a lot of the mistakes that have been made this season have been self-inflicted by the board. And this is coming from someone who, in particular, Speakman's been a big fan of his, but with the Beale appointment, he's shown very, very, very bad traits of arrogance there, and he should be held to account for it. But yeah, John was also right. We said, you both were right. The intriguing bit is the summer, where it depends what we're going to do. And it almost kind of felt like the end of the season was on autopilot, really, sort of trying to get to that point. And now we have got to the point. It's where the intrigue really does start.
Where did the season go wrong, John? Can you pinpoint the exact moment where the season went wrong? Because I think if you ask 10 people that question, 4 or 5 of them might say the same thing, and then you might get 3 or 4 different answers for that. Because I think there's a few different parts where you can say the season went wrong. But if you had to personally pinpoint one part of it, what would it be?
To be fair, I think there is a couple of things, and I think I'm probably going back to maybe our transfer business in the summer. Obviously, we don't get that focal point up front to play off, albeit Hamir looking good in pre-season. I mean, we did play some poor teams, but he was looking okay, and we just didn't really replace what we'd been lacking anyway. We didn't seem to to add to it in any way. Obviously, the Corey Evans injuries probably hindered us a lot. The striker situation has hindered us. We know, tenfold. I think, and then the Mowbray thing probably, he gets his frustration. Then, it by all accounts it turns a bit sour behind the scenes, and then he doesn't really have those points in the bank to sort of carry on. And then you're looking at the appointment of Mick Beale, and it was just so underwhelming. I remember being at the Bristol City game and it being just ready to be announced. And even though it wasn't the worst, I think we were worse under Dodds than we were under Beale, but it was just very underwhelming. And I go back to the original the point, just the transfer window for me just wasn't good enough, and it's a shame because we probably were only 2 or 3 decent-ish players. We're not talking about going out and signing Mbappe, which a lot of people go, oh, we should be spending this and spending that. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I think in the transfer window we're normally quite, we've managed to get Clark on, for relatively not a lot. Robert's the same, and Stuart we've sold for 10 million. We've managed, that really, really well. But you just think those little tweaks we could have just made, and like we just alluded to then, a bit of arrogance from Speakman, and we're told, there's this, magic computer and this succession planning. It doesn't seem like that's even a thing, because we sacked Mowbray, and we just sort of think, well, you think, well, we've got someone lined up. Doesn't happen. We're selling Stuart. Well, who are we buying then? With Corey Evans leaving, who are we having? Where are these succession plans? Because at the moment they're not looking to me like a real thing. Mick Beale obviously gets sacked, and then it's we'll just have Dodds. And where is the forward thinking? And already we're seeing now people being interviewed, and do we really have a plan of who we want and what we want? Because at the moment I don't think we do. It's very much a let's see what we've got behind the scenes to go and do those things, because certain people won't come here with the requirements and the budgets and the model. Sorry for going on quite long, but yeah, I still think it goes back to the transfer activity in the summer, which ultimately put us on the back foot. I think, even though we started okay, to be fair.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll get on the the future in the future of this podcast, but like John says there, he pinpointed on the transfer window. If you ask the same question of other people, Michael, everyone will say Sack and Mowbray, which I just don't think is accurate, because if you take out what happened after that, Mowbray probably did deserve to be sacked.
Yeah, I think this is the thing I've always made the point of, and I think for me, just to touch on the transfer window, for me personally, I think a lot of the signings we made were signings. Some of them were definitely signings not made for this season, but in a couple of years' time, and that's why I'm reluctant to judge a lot of them yet. But one thing John is right on is the focal point. It's not even a striker scoring goals; it's the focal point. But that's an old argument. We've said that loads of times. We know the club's got to address it this summer, and it's negligence if they don't. To get onto your question about Mowbray, for me, I think a lot of people, and again, if you two disagree, that's fine. But for me, I think a lot of people confuse Mowbray going and Beale getting appointed as the same thing, which it's not. Because on its own, towards the end with Mowbray, there were faults with Mowbray. And I think, and don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Tony Mowbray. I like him a lot. But even I said, even when it was going well, I still never had that feeling he was ever going to get us promoted, because I think there were times when Plan A worked, and this is something I've repeated loads of times, so sorry to anyone who's bored of me saying it, but when Plan A worked, we were fluent to watch. We were exciting to watch. Even this season, I think early performances, when it was going well, early part of this season, we were actually genuinely quite good to watch. The problem was, when teams figured out how to stop us and to play against us, Mowbray never had a plan. Now, you can argue, did he have the tools to change the plan to a plan B? That's a fair question. but it doesn't change the fact for me that there wasn't a plan B with Mowbray. And again, I want to stress I do like Mowbray, but towards the end, I felt it was starting to get a bit repetitive and stale, and that even as someone, you guys know how much I bang on about clean sheets all the time, but it was just even little. I'm not saying play for clean sheets. Obviously, you still want to attack and score, but we weren't being good enough defensively, in my opinion. We were still conceding silly goals that weren't getting coached out with the players. But I think ultimately, I mean, obviously Mowbray's sacking to me looks bad because of what's happened since. That doesn't necessarily mean, as you said before, that Mowbray didn't deserve to go, because you could argue that he definitely did. For me, as I've said, John's pinpointed the transfer window. My personal opinion was the appointment of Michael Beale. That was what the turning point was, the primary one. But, if you looked at it, if you'd have known at the time when Mowbray was about to get sacked, he's going to get sacked, but then you're going to get Beale, then get Dodds again, then you'd obviously would have kept Mowbray. So it's all hindsight and everything. But to my perspective, the sacking of Tony Mowbray and the appointment of Michael Beale aren't the same incident, and for me should be judged as separate incidents altogether.
Yeah. And obviously there's been a lot else happened, not necessarily on the pitch this season, but off the pitch. John, you've got the Black Hat bar fiasco with the Newcastle game. Obviously you've got the change of kind of performance level where it was just boring to watch. You've got the whole ticketing thing, and these things might seem somewhat irrelevant to how the season's panned out. But when you've got all these things going on off the pitch, it does spill onto the pitch at times, and that probably has played somewhat of a part. I know that's probably ludicrous to say for some people, but it does, like I say, have that kind of knock-on effect, because the atmosphere changes when fans aren't happy with what they're getting or what the club are doing. When the fans aren't happy, the atmosphere just dies. When the atmosphere dies, the players feel that, and like I say, it all kind of contributes into one massive thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think at a football club, I think there's nothing better than masking everything is winning football games, and winning football games well, like we were. There wasn't. Obviously, you hear about this and that, but when you're sort of playing the fluid football we were last season, and it was going really well. Obviously, the main frustration was, I can't buy a home shirt, which is it's sort of like
isn't it?
Seen as seen as a small problem when you're winning. As soon as you start to there's a drop off in any way, and it's every other thing is obviously under the microscope. In the world we live in at the moment, every little thing will be, even just ringing up for a ticket, or like you say, the Black Cats bar thing, which was just let's call it what it is, an absolute shit show. We sort of invite our neighbours to come around, and they can just sort of do what they want, make them feel at home, and to be fair to them, they had a bloody good old day. I know plenty of them who did really enjoy it, and they were sort of embarrassed for me. And then you had the performance. We didn't really have a go either. And yeah, everything just gets obviously blown. Not that it shouldn't, but everything just gets blown up. And then, like you say, it will then start to spill, onto the pitch. And then listening to Mike Dodds every single week, that the same boring, rhetoric just coming out with it. The players are up for it, and we're going to do this and do that, and nothing happens. It's like, I'm sick of hearing it, mate. To be fair, and it's the actions you want to see, and how we were. It sums it up perfectly. Where I always thought, how are they going to go? With sort of the season ticket, launch, coming out, and we're playing crap. We haven't got a manager. Nothing's really going our way. How do you then sell it to the fans to keep them? Not that they won't come back, but what's your selling point? And I was really intrigued to see that. And then obviously they come up with the new stuff, and Hummel back on board, and that does seem to to rally rally the troops almost a little bit, and think, okay, well, if small things are going on behind the scenes, obviously it's a better infrastructure, and obviously a few things getting changed around the stadium, and they look like they're going to start doing a few more bits. It's taken a while, to be fair, and it almost seems like because of the drop off and people who have started to kick off, it's sort of the board have sort of taken a bit of notice and thought, okay, And, you know, for me, 100% they owe us after the Newcastle thing. And how anyone could say, oh, they didn't know. You know, I genuinely don't buy that at all. But, you know, I'll sort of half accept it. You know, if they do try and really do the right things in the summer, and, you know, and that starts appointing the right head coach and getting the right players in, and, you know, everything off the pitch, having like accessible, you know, being able to go and buy a shirt if we want one, like now or the end of next season. You know, those types of things do really mean something to people. And it's definitely been a thing we've been lacking. Obviously, Davison's gone from behind the scenes. I'm sure there's plenty more that probably need to go as well. But it's, again, off the pitch is still a massive, you know, up in the air type of thing. And it was a case of, let's just get the season just finished, you know, and that's on and off the pitch, I think.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask John a question? Sorry. I'm just curious to see, because we mentioned the Newcastle, well, actually, both of you. Did you two, how much damage do you think the Newcastle game did for us, both in terms of how we performed on the pitch, but particularly the catastrophic disaster in the build-up to it?
I think to me it's a trust thing. You know, you can't tell me that Kirill didn't know about it, and certain people didn't know about it, and
which I,
you know, I'm not saying,
by the way, that's bollocks.
I'm not saying Davison's. You know, I don't even know the guy. I'm not saying he's good or bad, but to be fair, the way the club was run off the pitch was awful. So you can't then turn out and go, oh, you know, we didn't know and we're sorry. We didn't think that would rub us up the wrong way. That is the worst thing that you could do is make your rivals feel at home, you know. And then, you know, we didn't even give them a game. We literally just took it. Obviously, they're a class above. That's where they are at the moment, and we accept that, and that's fine. But we didn't really have a go. They had literally the day of, well, not even day of their lives, but they had a really good old day. They had their photo taken on the pitch, and those scenes, we allowed them to happen, and that to me is almost sort of unforgivable. And it does, you know, it does have a knock-on effect to fans, and because you think, what are we being taken for? You know, it's not on at all. And they, to be fair, to me, they do owe us a lot.
Yeah. Well, 17 minutes in, we haven't mentioned a positive from this season, and albeit not many, there certainly are some positives to take from the season. Obviously, Chris Rigg, you know, it's his first proper season. He's still only 16, due to turn 17, I think, in June. I think it is. He's played a lot of first-team football and impressed. You've got Jack Clark, who, you know, albeit missed a couple of months with injury, had another very good season. Like Dan Neil, Dan Ballard, continuing to show what they're capable of. But especially we'll start with Chris Rigg, Michael. Obviously, who knows what's going to happen with him. I think Man United are interested in him. Obviously, Newcastle are interested in him. A couple of German teams interested in him. And as it stands, the club don't really have a say in the matter. If he wants to leave, he'll leave. Sunderland probably get a fee at like a hearing at some point, or he stays. But he has been one of the positives from this season, coming through the academy into the first team at 16. Yeah,
and the fact just the age you've just said there, it really reminds people how young he actually is. I know we have a youth policy, but even for our terms, he's probably a baby. So that he's done really, really well. I mean, obviously the one thing he did wrong, I think, was giving the penalty away against Southampton. But he's 16. You're going to make a mistake like that. The thing that impressed me the most whenever I've watched him is the maturity that he seems to have shown. And again, he's much younger than anyone else probably in the first team. I mean, I'm assuming we count Chris Rigg as a first team player now. So even if you count him in that bracket, then he's younger than anyone else in the squad. And the game that stood out to me was the game against Leicester at the Stadium of Light, which was a game which, funnily enough, for our standards, was a game we actually didn't do too badly and should have got something out of. But the point is, Chris Rigg didn't look out of place, and that was against the team that ended up going on to win the league. So I think that's a real testament to see how good he's done. And the challenge for Sunderland becomes, can we persuade him to sign a long-term contract next month? Because, he does turn 17 mid-June, I think. So that's going to be the challenge, to try and keep hold of him. But at the same time, that for me is why playing him at the back end of the season was always important, because I think hopefully that might tilt things in our favour and get him to sign a long contract. And
I think it works in our favour in multiple ways as well. Because like you say, it's probably, you know, if you're Chris Rigg in that situation, you'd be like, I could go to Man United and probably never play for them in the next 10 years that I spend there, or get first team football in the Championship, a team where, you know, you're familiar with your surroundings, you're familiar with the players you're playing with. But at the same time, if he does leave, I think Sunderland get a bigger fee than they would have otherwise, because he is a first-team player and he has been in the first team. So I think, like you say, I think it does kind of work in our favour, regardless how much he's played this season.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, you'd like to think it would. I mean, I suppose that from his perspective, you've got to remember, like you said, he is only 16. Obviously, there's the caveat that he could get a career-ending injury in the next year, and then his football career is over. We don't know that things like that could happen, but there's also an equally a good chance that Chris Rigg has got, well, probably, if he looks after himself, he's got probably another 2 decades ahead of him, really, in terms of playing, or certainly about another 15 years, really, if things go according to plan for him. So if, say, he signs a longer contract here, it's a win-win for both parties, because then I'd like to think then he will feel that he's trusted here. He feels that we want to integrate him into the first team. And I think if he does sign the contract particularly, I think he'll play a massive role for us next season. And I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he started at least 25 to 30 games, maybe more. And then you've got to remember that Sunderland benefit in the future if he outgrows us. So I think, and also he'll earn them. And if he keeps performing at the rate he is, even if he stays here and keep performing like he is and improving, he'll get his big move one way or another. Absolutely no question about it. I just hope that Sunderland are smart with what we end up doing, because, like I said before, if you give him, say, a 5-year deal and you get him to sign it, right, then in, say, 2 years' time, if we still haven't got promoted, which would be quite poor, actually, but if, say, at that point you haven't gone up, he's outgrown you, then you could at least command a significant fee, because at the end of that second year, you've still got 3 years left on his deal. So, and then he's earned a bigger move. So, one way or another, for him, it's a massive period coming up for him and his family to decide what he wants. And to be fair, although I think his family are black and white persuasion, is that right?
His dad absolutely is, yes.
Yeah, I thought at least one member of his family definitely was. But even his dad seems to be, even through being a black and white persuasion, his dad seems to be thrilled that he's doing what he was doing. I mean, even the scenes when he scored against Southampton, the 5th goal, well, I think there might have been an image of his dad looking absolutely buzzing about it. So I think for them, I'd like to think they know it's a massive spell coming up for him, because yes, he could go out somewhere, he could go somewhere else and come back to us on loan or whatnot. But I don't know. I just feel like you might get a year on loan with Sunderland, and then what? You know, I think this is why I think this period coming up for all concerns a massive one to consider what's best for Chris Rigg. Because even if you look at it from a money perspective, if he performs well for us and signs a contract, you'll get the money later on down the line.
Yeah. And of course, the other main positive from the season, John, is Jack Clarke. Probably player of the season, if you ask anyone that question. At least 9 out of 10 would say him. And like I say, he's had a very good season. Would probably, if not definitely, have been maybe relegated. It's probably not too much of a stretch to say if we didn't have him this season, especially since Mowbray did leave. You know, everything good that kind of happened at the club came through him, whether it was goal, whether it was assist, whether it was anything along the lines of that. And again, somewhat similar to Chris Rigg's situation, where whatever happens, you know, in the next kind of few weeks, few months, will benefit Sunderland. Either Jack Clarke stays, and you know, you go into the new season with, you know, one of the best players to have played in the Championship last season, or you get 20, 25 million to reinvest into a squad, which, if you do correctly, should be, you know, enough to assemble a, maybe a stretch to say it, but should be enough to assemble a promotion-winning team.
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, it is win-win for us, and it's probably a shame, but you have to respect that maybe he has, especially with his numbers, obviously has outgrown us. There's not really any super loyalty in football anymore, and if he does go to the Premier League, then you have to just say fine, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure being able to watch. I think he comes across in the documentary as well as a really nice kid, and an excellent footballer to watch. And like we say, his numbers are outstanding, and it wouldn't surprise me if he does really, really, really well in the Premier League. And obviously, we've given him the platform to go and do that. But don't get me wrong, we've seen what transfers are going out of the Championship at the moment, and he's still very young, and he's on an okay contract, I think, yearly. So we've still got a bit of insurance there, but I certainly would be holding out, because I'm sure Tottenham will be due a chunk.
25%.
25%, I believe, wasn't it?
I don't know. I presume that's of profit. Not that it means much.
Yeah,
It can either be 25% of profit or sale, but I think we got them for about 750,000, so it works about the same, regardless. But
yeah, so you're hoping at least, ideally we'd be looking to bank sort of between 20 and 25 million. I think to us, I would say with what people are going for, still very, very young, and we're the ones who have, given him the platform, so we deserve to be, compensated for that. Obviously, his agents are a knobhead, but that's just one of those. But if he does go, he goes certainly with my best wishes, and there should be a nice sizable chunk added into we'll call it the transfer budget. Do I necessarily trust us to be able to replace him? It's very, very hard to replace a player like that, but obviously it's a very intriguing one. What do we, if you're talking about maybe losing one or two, you're maybe talking that there's a sort of 30 to 40 million to spend, whereas we're sort of going around with the 1s and 2 millions. It's another added pressure, I think, to Speakman and co of what they can find and what they can do. But we're gonna have to replace his goals whilst adding to him as well. But yeah, it goes with our best wish if he does go. But I'm holding on to the fact that he said, "Oh, I'll see you next." I think it was see you all next season. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Hopefully so. One thing that's probably remained consistent supporting Sunderland is that the future is always more positive than the past, purely because you don't know what the future holds. So on the future, John, first thing is the appointment of a head coach, which has been obviously mentioned pretty much every day for the past, 2, maybe 3 months since the sacking of Beale and the reappointment of Dodds as interim manager. Everyone's kind of a bit cheesed off that we still haven't got one. And like I said to Michael before we actually started recording it, doesn't really make a difference in the grand scheme of things whether you get a new head coach in half an hour or whether you get a new head coach in 3 weeks' time, because ultimately the players are on holiday. He has no say in transfers. It's going to make no difference really. But whatever does happen and whenever it does happen, Sunderland have no excuse not to get the right appointment. They've had, like I said, 2 or 3 months to make sure they get it right. Plenty of candidates have not just come available, but the likes of Will Still haven't left Rems. Obviously, Danny Roll's out of the question now, realistically, with the compensation fee mentioned for him. But like I said, there's no room for error in this appointment, and any error that is made can't possibly be overlooked with the time frame they've had.
No, they've had plenty of time to identify and do your due diligence, and have those conversations through back channels, which happens all the time, apart from seems to be with us. I think the pressure really is on after maybe what I'd call 2 bad appointments in Bill and Dodds for this second or third spell, whatever you want to call it. I think for me personally, it's I'd like it to happen sooner rather than later, just so he can get in and maybe get his own feel for the place and be here while the players are not here and go through plans and ideally I think sooner rather than later. But yeah, I'm just looking for it to to be inspired just a little bit and just to be excited, and I think excitement comes as well from a little bit of unknown. There's a lot of noise around Will Steele. It could turn out amazing. It could be an absolute car crash. You never know, but there is that tiny bit of intrigue and excitement that does think,
people say that all the time as well about appointments. They'll be like, you've got to go for a safe appointment, someone who's proven in the league, someone who's done this, done that. But every single managerial appointment is a risk, because there's no manager in the world that succeeded at every club that he's been at, bar maybe Pep Guardiola. And he's walking into teams with the likes of Haaland and De Bruyne and Messi and all that. Well, it's a lot easier when you have that, but there's very few managers that you look at and be like, yes, he's going to 100% do what we need him to do. So when people talk about the likes of Will Still or René Maric or whoever else gets linked with the job being a risk, it doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things, because like I say, every manager comes with their own risks.
Yeah, of course, and we'll go back to one of our best managers in Roy Keane. And that was a massive risk, never really managed anywhere. And just probably one of the best, the best times. I'm not always sure about like you say, the safest appointment. I'd probably say McKenna at Ipswich was probably quite a risky one. And look, turned out absolutely fantastic. Danny Roll, you look at what he's done at Sheffield Wednesday with the resources and what happened before then. And just, it's just obviously there's people in charge just to make those decisions, and they are under a huge amount of pressure. But if, with the model, we're looking for someone to come in and play exciting, football with some young, excellent footballers. Let's be honest, we've got some excellent footballers in our squad, and some excellent youngsters need to be, bedded in as well. They're just the head coach. It's not like they're controlling, like you say, all the transfers and everything around the club. And, it's not, those days are long gone, which, whether you like it or not, that is, like you say, it's just one of those things. But it's, I'm looking at the moment just to be a little bit, inspired, excited, take a little, it's going to be a risk and point will still, because no one knows what it's going to be like. Even Marich, is it? We know how the transfer business works. We'll think, oh, we're after this player, and then out of nowhere we get some, kid from Bayern Munich's second team. That's the model at the moment, and I think that's the sort of way the managerial or head coach thing is going to go, I think.
Yeah. Last but not least, the last thing to look forward to, or I say look forward to in quotation marks, really, because it's always quite a stressful part of the off season, but is obviously transfers. Michael, there's going to be a lot of bids coming for players, not necessarily a lot of players leaving, but like Ballard, definitely going to have interest. Dan Neil probably going to have interest. Patterson already has interest. Rigg, Clark, Job, there's going to be players linked with moves away, and there's going to be some players that inevitably do leave. But the focus has to be on players coming in, because as we've seen from this season, we have a lot of players that aren't really ready to step up to the level required of a team wanting promotion. And so we have to get business done early. We never do, but we have to. A lot of that will have to be focused on strikers, not just one, possibly two incoming strikers. You're looking at that kind of wing position on Patrick Roberts' side. I think he didn't even get a goal throughout the entirety of last season. You're looking for someone to improve the team there. If Clark leaves, you need a replacement there. So it's probably going to be another very, 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 well, it should be anyway, a very busy transfer window.
We need to have one, don't we, really? I think that the striker thing is, it's beating a dead horse at this point. Or what's that Simpsons clip? Stop beating them, they're already dead, basically. We're already repeating ourselves this many times with the strikers, but it's important. Like I've said earlier, you need a striker just for a focal. Ideally, someone to score goals. Of course, we'd love that, but someone at least to be a focal point you can get, whether it's Clark or let's say if Liam Miller came in, for example, as a potential replacement. Get other players into play, whatever you might want to call it. It's a massive window, but we've known for months how big the summer is. But transfers is always a busy time of it because, like you said earlier, we have got that. The one thing we have got that I think is good for us over a team like Hull, for example, where many of Hull's best players were loan signings, and they're probably unlikely to have them next season. Where Sunderland have got the advantage is that we've got, off the top of my head, Clark, Neil, Ballard, Patterson, Hume, Job, I'd even say Equa to a lesser degree. I think you have got players there who are assets, and if you sell them, particularly with the exception of Clark and Neil, because they've got 2 years left on their deals, I think everybody else has either got 3 years left or 4. And I think we're in a very strong position to be able to command good fees. But with that, obviously, as you've mentioned before, then comes the pressure of, right, you've got the money. This is what the model is. Now what are you going to do with it? This is where I think that's where I'm waiting to judge to see, because I think it's inevitable. I think at least one big sale is going to happen this summer, possibly two. But what I would say is, in terms of transfers, sorry, because I know you're going to say something, but if we're going to sell assets, I don't want any more than 2 going in one window, because you need to keep a lot of the same players there to make sure the continuity is as seamless as possible.
Yeah. Ahmad back on loan? Maybe, probably not, possibly.
Well, Eric Ten Hag keeps messing with my emotions there, so probably not going to happen.
Would be nice. It would be nice. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in the summer. We'll see what happens in the next coming weeks. I'd imagine some sort of news, some different news comes out in the next kind of week or two about, a head coach. Obviously, Will's still out in France doing his coaching badges at the moment. Whoever else gets linked with the job, I'm sure something will happen with that. Chris Wigg's future will probably be decided in the next kind of 3-4 weeks as well, with him due to turn 17. And then, like I say, all attentions turn to the transfer window and then to the next season, which, like I said right at the start of the video, is still 4 months away. So we'll see what happens with that. Anything that does happen, we'll of course recap it, talk about it, discuss the good, discuss the bad, discuss the future, and discuss anything else around that. But we'll be back to talk about whatever happens next at Sunderland. But until then, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.